This is Deborah Johnson for Women at Halftime, and I'm passionate about helping women use their untapped skills, resources, and talents to create their ideal work and lifestyle, making a difference in their second half. Well, hello, this is Deborah Johnson, and it's great to be here with you today. And before we get going on our amazing topic of different communication styles, I want to remind you that we have so many free resources on our goalsforyourlife.com webpage. Go to that page, and there are many links there for things that you can download, and it will really help you to use your skills, resources, and talents. We want to help you make your second half even better than your first with your ideal lifestyle and your ideal business. So make sure you access those. Also, we have an area of music, which is Learn Music Again, and that cart will be opening soon as well. So you can go directly to that website, learnmusicagain.com. So today's subject, different communication styles for different corporate cultures. Now, this is a subject I'm going to approach just a little differently than most, because my background is not working in corporate or in big business. In fact, my background is working more in the arts. But it has been really full of communicating with multiple diverse groups and organizations, including artists, actors, financial personnel, bankers, technology, and many others. And some of the principles that we are covering today work across the board. You know, the styles may be a little different, but the messaging is the same. And I think it's an important message for today's world. And communication, it's never been more important because people don't feel understood, cared for, or respected. Respect is a big deal. You want people to feel like they are worth something, at least, or even what they're worth, what they think they're worth, at least. So finding a way to cut through preconceived ideas and judgments with confidence, kindness, and even boldness, it really works wonders. As examples, I'm going to use a couple of musicals that I've written, and I'm also going to use a food illustration, to help us understand and apply some of these principles. And there are 3 communication styles that we'll cover in this episode. Of course, we can expand from here, but I'm going to talk about inspiration, I'm going to talk about language, and I'm going to talk about firmness. So first, inspiration. When I had 7 members of a musical cast, they all threatened to quit a production of mine because they had a hard time working with a director with script choices that weren't really working for them. And I had to step in. Now, first of all, I was the writer and the producer. So if they quit, I'd lose a lot of my investment by them just walking out. So at first, I approached the issue with honesty and then inspiration. And I found out quickly, I've been a musician for a number of years, and theater people, they're a little bit different, even though we think they're in the arts, they're still in the arts, but they really personalize a character. So this was very important to them. So I told them I understood how they felt, and I would commit to having those script changes ready for each rehearsal. And at that point, we were rehearsing every single day. And it's very common when you are in rehearsal to have these changes when things aren't working. You have to have the writer available so you can make those little tweaks and changes. This wasn't just workshopping it had been workshopped. And this was ready for performance, but when you get it onto a stage, there are changes that need to be made. It's very, very common. So I also told them that I would be personally opening up each day's rehearsal with a couple of inspiring words. The directors were not going to do that at this point. I would open up each rehearsal. I wanted them all there on time and to stay with me at least another week. That's all I asked for at first, just one more week. And then I brought in the illustration of the Kevin Costner baseball movie, For the Love of the Game. And if you've heard any of my episodes before, you know I married a professional baseball player, so we've seen like almost every baseball movie I think out there. And this one was really wonderful because it focused on a pitcher, which that's what my husband did. He played for the minors for the Indians. And he's on once a month with me, so you want to make sure you catch those episodes. But one of the scenes in For the Love of the Game, it highlights a moment when the pitcher is on the mound and he's focused so intently on pitching that to the cheering crowd that the cheering crowds in the stands, they go completely silent in his mind. So he's focused. I didn't say that exactly right, but he's focused so intently. So he's all he's doing is concentrating on pitching that ball, that cheering crowd that's growing louder and louder and louder, and especially in the movie how they were amplifying it, but then it grew completely quiet in his mind because he knew his major responsibility right at that moment was to pitch that leather-stitched round object, that baseball, to that batter in the box. And this is a type of focus that I started terming and coining this as major on the majors. And because the focus right there was the most important thing to that pitcher right then is to get that ball to that batter in the right sort of pitch that would win the game for their team, make the batter hit or swing at that hit that he wouldn't get it. That was his main focus. And so I started every rehearsal at that point with that phrase, major on the majors. And I made it an inspiring phrase, and it really took us through the rest of that union-imposed 6 weeks of rehearsal process. When you rehearse a musical, and I was putting my musicals, I was launching the world premieres, so I was renting the studio, renting the theater actually, and the rehearsal space, and we had 6 weeks. Just after we had auditioned actors, we had just 6 weeks to get that ready for the actual performances, and this was union rules. So they stayed with me. I was committed to doing that every single rehearsal. We had, I think, at least 3 or 4 a week or more. I think we had more little extra small ones too. But I started out every single rehearsal this way with major on the majors. And then the wonderful directors I had, they did take over. But what happened here was the cast needed inspired. They were starting the conflict with each other and starting to talk behind everyone's back. It was not a good situation. And after that as well, we had a full 12-week successful performance run. And there were a few more bumps that happened along the way, but there was a commitment from all parties to complete the job and to complete successful performances. And I needed that to happen. I needed a video out of their performances, and I needed some reviews, which I got. Very successful that way, but it took those inspiring words and using that little story to be able to help them. So that was communication style number 1, give them inspiration, if they'll listen especially. But I had to kind of take them all, gather them all, and tell them they needed to listen. And number 2 is give them language they'll understand. There are 2 members of my immediate family who are gluten-free. And it's my sister and my sister-in-law. No, actually, it's my sister and my daughter-in-law, not my sister-in-law, my daughter-in-law. And I did understand that taking gluten out of a diet, it could really make a difference for some people, but I wasn't really sure why. In fact, I kind of wondered, why did God make wheat and we've been eating it for centuries with, it seems like a few issues, very few issues, but now it's just become more popular. And I thought maybe at first it was just a fad. So, but what I did was I wanted to respect them and talk in a language that they'd understand and make sure that they knew, because it was going to communicate respect. So I started to look for gluten-free foods and desserts to serve each of them when we were together, because then we'd be able to eat together without worry. And it really opened, they were relaxed. So I communicated that I was doing this. I wanted to give them that language that I was working on this. And so one year I made our Christmas morning Belgian waffles with gluten-free flour. I was a bit nervous about this because I had been making waffles. This was our tradition on Christmas morning with Belgian waffles. So I was a little nervous thinking, okay, are these going to really turn out? But they turned out great. They turned out actually wonderful. And the true test was from the rest of the family. And because I have 2 other sons, and they devoured them with plenty of strawberries and fresh whipped cream. So I knew they were popular. And that was great. So I also found some really wonderful gluten-free muffins to make for my sister. The Belgian waffles were for my daughter-in-law and their family. So that was nice because we had, our sons and our family over for Christmas. But then I wanted to be able to give my sister something. And the moment my sister sees the message gluten-free, I see the smile on her face. And she never knew she was gluten-free growing up. So that's why I was kind of questioning this. And she's a professional violinist, but her arms and shoulders were aching and her hands were growing like really stiff. And what happened with her, it was amazing. When she took gluten out of her diet, her arms and shoulders, it quit some of the aching, and she could move her hands even more freely on the strings of her violin. If you know anything about violin, it's a very intricate, involved instrument to play, and she's very good. She started at 4 years old, very good violinist, but it really changed a lot for her because it helped her then continue playing and doing what she was so skilled to do. And by giving both Sandy and Jessica, Sandy is my sister, Jessica is my daughter-in-law, what they really needed in a language they could understand, I really started understanding their issues a bit more. It's like it turned it around for me a little more. All of a sudden, even though I didn't understand this whole gluten-free thing, that because I thought, okay, why aren't you eating all of this wheat? Look how plentiful this is. So it really started making sense to me that there was really a reason for this. They weren't just, giving me a bunch of demands. So first of all, give them that inspiration. And then second, give them the language that they'll understand. And not only the language, but what they needed as part of that language. And then number 3, I really wanted to cover this in this episode. Give them the firmness when needed. And this is what's missing sometimes, is because, we're kind of inspiring and we're giving. But sometimes what we need to do is communicate clearly, but very firmly. So after we've listened and after we've given them the language they needed and listened to them, well, also now taking action. Well, another musical production of mine, it held some different challenges. This was another world premiere of another musical. And at this time, I was managing a extremely large, very young cast. So I think I had a cast, and a large cast for me at this time was like 17. I think I had 17 people. And I hired directors and costumers, stage designers. It was a huge undertaking. And actually, the theater community is very connected. So I needed these directors, and they were able to attract some wonderful young talent. They grew together just like a family. It was really, really a fun experience. So it was a huge undertaking, though, for me, because I not only wrote the book, the script, but all the music. So it was a huge undertaking, and it was a large work based on a beautiful love story of Nicholas and Alexandra of the Russian Revolution. But there, we got into this and did the auditions, and we started in on our 6-week rehearsal process. And again, with union rules, you only have 6 weeks. Even though I was working with some very talented student talent, I also had those that were union. So I needed to work with everyone with union guidelines. I made sure everyone was treated fairly. So, and I also, at this point, because there were things that needed happening and it was such a large work, I needed a little help bumping up the script a bit. I knew I just needed some ideas. I would be committed to making those changes, but I needed some help. So, as we went along after a couple of those little suggested rewrites, I noticed when I received some of the changes, my name was not on the script, on the book after one of the rewrites. It was this other writer's name that was on front and center. Well, I had hired this writer to help me bump up the script. I had not hired him to change this whole thing. And what was my feelings right then? I was fearful, first of all. I was really angry. But I knew I needed to handle this. And because the script, it needed work, it was a normal part of the process, again, as I spoke on the first one. And the writer I hired, he was very talented and a very, very good friend of the directors. And I needed these directors as well. They were very networked. They were the directors. They were meant for this musical. They had so much talent to bring and working with this sort of group. And I paid them, but they were great. They were very, very important for this work. So, and I trusted them, but I was mortified to find this writer's name on the front of the script with mine nowhere in sight after one of those rewrites. Well, apparently this writer, it was a nice guy, but he thought he had changed enough of the script to now claim ownership as the main writer of the book. Now realize these were ideas and no formalized script changes were really approved by me at this point. And this happens, actually. This is intellectual property. We hear about this happening all the time with stolen property. But what do you do at this point when you want to keep a cast, you want to keep a crew, and you want to keep directors working? And especially when there are those relationships going together. And I knew I needed a firm way to communicate, yet I needed to be very discreet. I didn't want anybody to panic. I didn't want anybody to quit. And boy, I had to kind of shut my mouth and okay, what am I going to do? Well, it was just providence, and I feel it was God's providence. That same evening, we had some friends coming over, and a good friend of mine who was coming over was fairly networked in a lot of the arts areas and production areas. And when I shared my dilemma, she was mortified. She was as angry as I was, because she had known my journey in even getting this work on a stage. And she immediately took her phone out and made the call to her attorney that she was personally able to contact right away. And her attorney knew the top Los Angeles theatrical attorney that works specifically on music theater contracts. Wow, I was hopeful that something would be able to be done here. And I knew at that point I needed to keep my mouth shut. I didn't say anything to any of the cast, which at that point, some of the cast were even staying at our home because the theater I had chosen was a large theater, but it was local to me. It was a great theater. But I let them stay weekends, and a couple of them just needed a place to hang out while we were in rehearsals. So I needed to keep my mouth shut, and I didn't speak to the directors, didn't speak to anyone about this until I could get a meeting with this attorney. So that next week, I was able to meet. That attorney got me right in, and he assured me that he could lock up the contract tight, retaining all of my intellectual property, and he even offered to draw up additional contracts for the directors with a limit on their future production rights to my work. And that's something I hadn't even thought about. And it was so wonderful for this, because he was networked well enough that he had even known who my directors were and knew that he could get a personal call with them. So I handed him over my credit card. I was perfectly willing for him to take over this process, and I kept my mouth shut there, but I knew it needed to be handled with firmness. I wanted all areas to be locked up tight, and he did. He closed up all deals with a firm but a kind hand, communicating on my behalf with all parties. And then I was able to move forward, even with a little more firmness than before, on making sure we ran things on time and we were on task. So I paid for this. This was something that I knew I would need to pay for, and I needed to pay for those new ideas. I wanted to make sure I was fair with all parties involved, but I was not going to give up my rights as the writer, the main writer. So I was able to not only keep my directors, but the writing ideas I had gained with my full cast and crew. But really, this came down to the way it was handled. I felt like finding the right person to represent me in this communication at this point made a huge difference. And I was able to hire another writer who helped me with more tweaks and more bumping up, in fact, more ideas that I could even use. And of course, I stayed up many more nights making all those changes, script changes, so the cast could rehearse the next day. So, but that was a really significant time for me, and how important communication styles are to keep things going and to not lose momentum, and to be kind, but to be firm. So again, the three areas of inspiration. Sometimes people need that sort of inspiration. They need respect. They need to be listened to, but inspirational with a message that will really communicate with them. And then the language that they'll understand, that little gluten-free sort of illustration says, when someone is gluten-free and they see that on the menu, that there's a certain cookie now and then that my sister will have go to a place for lunch, and she'll see the gluten-free cookie. That's her language. Oh, she can get it and eat it. So, and then give firmness when needed, and really take a stand for what is right, but use the right tools to be able to do that. If I had responded in real anger, and there were some very tense times during this rehearsal process, so I had to just kind of leave the scene. But if I had just responded in pure anger over this situation, it could have shut everything down, and the outcome ended up being, I was able to get what I needed. There were more obstacles, in fact, many more obstacles on this particular musical because of some things that happened in the theater and everything else. But I was still able to get an amazing video, the pictures, the reviews, everything that I needed out of that world premiere to be able to promote it more fully in the future. So it really takes commitment, it takes listening, and definitely perseverance. If I had quit in any of these areas, I would have closed off some relationships. If I had quit with that first cast and just said, okay, guys, just suck it up, and you need to just accept things the way they are, and instead of saying, I will work on this script, we will get it working for where everybody's working, because a lot of these actors I had in this particular case where I had those 7 actors, they were experienced, And they were not big name actors, but they were experienced, and they loved to be a part of a new work. And this was a fun new work. And it was a musical based on Rumpelstiltskin. It's a very fun work. And there were script changes that definitely needed changed because of the character development there happening. And I needed to listen to that, but yet they needed inspired. They needed to focus on one main thing, on the major of the majors, instead of fighting among each other. And then the communication style, as we said, with the language, and then the real firmness with, that took definitely perseverance on my side, because I was exhausted, and just the thought of it made me exhausted. So, and all of these apply to really all levels of focus, whether a sole proprietor, if you're doing something by yourself, or you're communicating as a coach, and that one-on-one, or in a group situation, in a corporation, in those communication styles, that they're going to be everywhere across the board, because different cultural styles are going to be there, and more so with a big word today is diversity, but with diverse people working in groups together. It doesn't matter who you are, how old you are, what race you are, what background you have, but you're going to have a different communication style. And so understanding that you just need to be committed to that together, speaking each other's language a little bit sometimes, and being committed to the process, inspiring each other, put a little humor in it, and definitely persevere through the process. And you don't have to be a doormat. You just need to be able to communicate effectively and fairly. So there's no easy back door to walk through in communicating with those different than us, but the commitment to work through tough issues with some sort of resolution that's a quality that's extremely, extremely valuable, and it's timeless, especially today. And I want to see people succeed. I want to see the projects finished with excellence, and to be all they can be, and for people to be all they can be as well. And that takes getting along, and it takes both sides being able to listen. If that first cast had not listened and not sat there and respected that I wanted them to stay another week, and then I convinced them another week, and we stuck it out, and we became very good friends. And so that's what it takes. This whole process does. So thank you for joining me today in this really a very important episode on communicating styles, and how we can use little different ways, whether we need more firmness, or whether we need to just listen, have more understanding, and change our language just a little bit, or if we need to inspire and add a little humor to the mix. It's been a pleasure being here with you today. I just enjoy these episodes so much. And I hope you join me next week with our subject, From Driving a School Bus to Leading a Team of Over 250,000, with Dennis Dowdell. Now, Dennis was on the ground floor of an organization called Herbalife, and he's been with them for many, many years, and he has an amazing story. You are going to want to make sure that you listen in next week. We had a great time on that interview, so I hope you join me. And I'd like to thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you listen and subscribe. And boy, I love reviews. So if you can write me a review, I would love that. If you could do that, and tell your friends. So until next time, Deborah Johnson with womenathalftime.com, goalsforyourlife.com, and I'll see you next week. Thank you for joining us on Women at Halftime. Visit goalsforyourlife.com or womenathalftime.com for many more resources, downloads, and programs, or to get in touch with me. I'd love it if you leave me a review and tell your friends. So until next time, this is Deborah Johnson signing off.